In a recent study, 61% of employees hated their jobs. The other 39%, they probably just hated their boss. About 6 years ago, just after I'd delivered The Kindness Rebellion, I came across these words: work is love made visible. And those words caught my attention. The very first thing I thought was, well, I wish I'd had those a few weeks ago when I was writing the talk on kindness. They'd have slotted straight in between Brené Brown and Donald Trump. Long story. But the more I thought about them, I thought there's more to these words than meets the eye. So I started to carry them and started to reflect upon them, to meditate upon them. I was hoping that if I did that long enough, they'd crack open and surrender their meaning to me. But the truth is, and the truth always is, if you carry something with love for long enough, then you open up to it. And I was opened up to these words. They came from a Lebanese poet called Khalil Gibran, wrote them over 100 years ago in 1923. So I'd like to share with you 4 stories of love and work through which I've seen some of the depths of meaning in this phrase. The first of these comes from 100 years ago too. My grandfather, Sam, was an East End pub pianist. He would be completely penniless on a Friday night. Why was he penniless on a Friday night? Well, because my grandmother had already gone to the factory to collect his wages. And so he'd go into a pub and he'd stick his pint pot on the corner of the piano and he'd start knocking out tunes all evening long. No sheet music, he couldn't even read music. But as the night went on, people would be joining in song and his pot would start filling up with shillings and even whole sixpences. By the end of the night, that was enough so that Saturday he could go to the betting shop, put it on a load of horses, a little bit of change left for the tramp on the corner of the street. So Saturday night, he'd be penniless again to wander into another pub. This speaks to me about an element of work and about work being love made visible. And it's the notion of craft. Craft speaks about the relation between the worker and the work itself. Whether you're making quilts or furniture or pieces of legal advice, craft describes those experiences of high absorption and high creativity where the line between the worker and the work dissolves. You even lose your sense of identity and your sense of time, and it's a highly productive and creative state. Now, in our modern language, we've driven out the vocabulary of craft. And as Marx said, our current economic system has driven craft out of our experience of work. He got very technical and described how it commodifies the product and alienates the worker. But I think we all know that the economists aren't quite right about this. There's something about work that's more than just the wage at the end of the month. Penny is a steward at a local airline. She's responsible for the safety and comfort of all the passengers in her care. In the morning, she puts on her smart uniform, packs her bag with everything she's going to need, and she slips a little tissue into her pocket so that she can deliver a really clear announcement to the passengers. But today, one of her passengers is in deep distress. A middle-aged man, floods of tears. And so today, Penny's own pocket tissue becomes a gift of love. And this speaks to me of the second element of work being love made visible, that of care. Care speaks of the relationship between the worker and the person to whom the service is being delivered, be they a pupil or a patient or a customer or a client or a passenger. And care speaks to our deepest capacity to be human. We're social creatures forming relationships all the time. We've done it even before we were humans. Primates do this all the time. And when you have a moment of human connection, even if it's in a transactional context, that is an expression of our deepest nature. It's an expression of love. My third story. My dad built Concorde. But when you're growing up in the schools in the shadow of the big aircraft factories of the 1970s, and actually everyone's dad built Concorde, and we'd all be in the playground staring up at the sky as the early prototypes were making their test flights over the school, pointing to the bits that our dads had made on these great aircraft. And in the factories, The men and women who built Concorde had a special bond, because when you're doing really tough things together, like building the finest aircraft ever flown, you have an experience of working together that doesn't stop the moment the last aircraft rolls off the production line. And so it was last September, 50 years later, at Dad's funeral, that there were men there who'd built Concorde. So this third quality after craft and care is comradeship. Comradeship is another word that slipped from our vocabulary, and we end up talking about staff or colleagues or even co-workers. But comradeship speaks of a tough challenge that you do together and you do for each other. Comrades break their bread together and share their meals together because they're in it for the long distance. We have moments of comradeship on a mergers and acquisition deal when you order pizza in so you can keep going for a few more hours in the night. You have moments of comradeship in a care home that's been locked down against to protect it, and you're all there to protect each other and your patients against a global pandemic. You have moments of comradeship when you're building Concorde. My fourth story is about a little old lady called Gay Delap. She's 76 years old, and she's just got out of prison. Gay was a teacher for most of her career, but more recently, she felt the call to become a kind of unofficial lollipop lady on the M25 motorway. You see, she'd heard a conference call with her Just Stop Oil colleagues, and they said they needed climbers to climb gantries. And her first thought was, well, I'm 76. I can't climb. Somebody else is going to have to do it. But Gay reflected in the words of a little book that Quakers read that says, take heed to the promptings of love and truth in your heart. And the more she thought of those, the more she thought, I do need to go and do this. And so it was at her sentencing, she explained to the judge that my heart was breaking for my 6 grandchildren and for all future generations. And he sentenced her to 18 months in prison. There's a few more words in Gay's little book that says, live adventurously. Take the opportunity to use your gifts for the greatest good. Let your life speak. And I believe she did. And that quality speaks to this fourth quality after craft and care and comradeship that we sometimes call calling or even contribution. This sense to be more than we currently perceive, or this sense that the world needs a contribution that is more than we're currently giving it. And we've experienced this in all kinds of walks of life, this sense that the world needs something, it needs mending, and it's our work that's going to do it. Chomsky put it like this. He said, unless you believe the world should be better, it's unlikely you're going to step up and make it so. And that requires a belief in an invisible quality to the world that we don't see yet. Charles Eisenstein called it the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. There's a saying that goes, we must plant dates. The dates, plant them in the knowledge that we're not going to eat them ourselves. We must live by the love of what we cannot see. So let's have a think about our jobs. For many of our jobs, we don't have these in-depth flow state experiences of craft all of the time. When we think about our customers, we don't think of mutual respect and care all of the time. When we think about our colleagues, then maybe camaraderie isn't the first thing that comes to our mind. And as for this sense of calling, well, sometimes the job is just needed to pay the rent at the end of the month. What is it then that gets between us and the expression of love through work? Well, in my leadership practice, I've become finely attuned to how power operates in human structures. And it's in the world of work and economics that power is most masked. And our role is to unmask power at work and see how power drives love from labour, how power turns craft into commodity, how power turns care into customer service, how it turns comrades into colleagues. And so it is, as we reflect on this, my quest for kindness at work drew me to the notion that work is love made visible. My reflection on those values gave me the 4 virtues of craft and care and calling and comradeship. My challenge is to all of us to find those experiences, and if you are a leader, it gets even better. Because if work is love made visible for you, then that means helping your people to have those beautiful experiences of craft in their work, creating the moments where they can have relational contact with their customers and clients, creating comradeship in the workplace. And your calling is to help them reach their fullest potential to create the better world that our hearts know is possible. When I first came across these words, they were a lone phrase loaded with meaning. But the one thing I didn't do was go back to the source and find out the text where they came from. But I'd like to close with a few lines from Khalil Gibran that end in these words. And I dedicate them today to Samuel Nash, and to Penny Wong, and to Barry Nash, and to Gay Delap. To love life through labour is to be intimate with life's inmost secret. All work is empty, save where there is love, for work is love made visible. Thank you.